duty of the free man to resist tyranny at every turn. Every man will either watch his freedom stripped away or take action to protect what he loves. Introducing the A3, the newest revolutionary body armor from Armored Republic. The A3 is the new standard for lightweight multi-hit body armor. A3 plates are incredibly light at 4.6 pounds. The patented design captures fragmentation while remaining multi-hit capable. The A3 will stop up to M80 ball, yet comes in at only 0.7 inches thick. The A3 is the thinnest NIJ.06 compliant or certified composite standalone plate that includes the drop test. The A3 is the first of its kind, patent pending, that combines an alloy strike face with polyethylene backing, revolutionizing body armor technology by providing strength and durability while remaining sleek and maneuverable. The A3 is the new standard in lightweight body armor. The fight against tyranny just got stronger.
It's Friday. Welcome to Cross Politics on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. I just named the show.
Yeah.
When we're going to release it. Friday.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's good. Pastor Toby, Chuck Knox, I'm the Water Boy, and this is one of those shows, you know, I was speaking in Idaho Falls last week and at this group called Stand Up for Idaho, and during the pandemic, they would have 300-400 people come to their weekly events.
300 or 400 a week.
A week.
Yeah.
They do weekly events, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And I went, maybe 100 people there. And he just said people just lost interest. Like the pandemic is
Stand up.
Well, you didn't have
over,
anything else
and
to
it's
do.
like
either.
Idaho.
And it's like, we're good.
Yeah.
That's why I keep saying bring on COVID 2.0, man.
But this is one of those shows like
Yeah.
the past is a tutor for how we need to be handling the future. If you get the past, you lose the tutor.
They'll do
That's
it
right.
again.
Yeah.
They'll do it again. This year, our Fight Laugh Feast conference is at the Ark Encounter in Kentucky on the politics of six-day creation. The politics of six-day creation is the difference between a fixed standard of justice and a careening standard of justice. The difference between the corrosive relativism that creates mobs and anarchy and tyranny and the freedom of objectivity, truth, and due process. The politics of six-day creation establishes the authority and the sufficiency of God's word for all of life. From what is a man? What is a woman? When does human life begin? How is human society best organized? All that is found in Genesis 1, 2, and 3, basically. So come here, Ken Ham, Pastor Doug Wilson, Dr. Ben Merkel, Dr. Gordon Wilson, Joe Rigney's going to be there, Michael Foster's going to be there. I'll give a talk. We'll do a live show, of course.
What's it on? What's the live show?
The live show is on Christian nationalism, of course, with our friends, Stephen Wolf, Joel Webbin.
we invited some others, but they didn't want to show
And
up.
of course, Pastor Wilson
tried.
will be joining us as well. So mark your calendars, October 11th to the 14th, as we fight, laugh, and feast with beer and psalms. The first night, our amazing lineup of speakers, rowdy Christian merch. Come get yourself a new sweatshirt. And a Sabbath feast to wrap up the occasion. Visit fightlaughfeast.com for more information and to register today. We're very grateful to have with us former Lieutenant Colonel Brad Miller. Graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point in 2003. Served 19 years on active duty in the United States Army. During his military career, he served throughout the U.S. as well as in diverse locations such as Afghanistan, Honduras, and South Korea. He was relieved of battalion command for refusing to go along with the COVID-19 vaccine mandate and subsequently resigned from the Army. Brad,
Unbelievable.
thank you for joining us on Cross Politic.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate standing shoulder to shoulder with you guys, in this fight. So thanks so much for having me on.
Man, I feel like I'm part of the military now. The way he just addressed me, like,
Yeah.
like,
well, you're welcome,
yeah,
Brad.
you're welcome.
You are
Sir.
welcome.
yes, sir.
Brad, 19. I mean, you were almost at a 20-year mark, which is pretty significant in the military. What makes you resign from your position just shy of your 20-year mark?
Yeah. So for those who may not be aware, the reason that the 20-year mark is so significant is because at 20 years of service, that's when you qualify for your retirement position. So, your retirement pension. So it is a big deal, right?
Wow.
So when the last day that I left the Army, I left with 19 years, 3 months, and 15 days of service. So about 8.5 months shy of the 20-year mark. So to answer your question, clearly not a decision that I took lightly. I mean, I knew exactly what I was doing. And the reason that I did it was because I felt at that moment that I just could not continue to put on the uniform. Not because I have anything against the Army per se, not because I have anything against military service per se, but actually because I found myself in a situation where, and I know this is going to sound paradoxical, but in order for me to maintain my oath that I took to the Constitution, I could not do that by remaining in the military. I was going to have to leave the military in order to actually maintain my oath. So again, not a decision that I took lightly. I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew exactly what I would be giving up, but I just felt like I'm not going to be able to put the uniform every day and look myself in the mirror and feel like I am actually doing what's right for the American people, my relationship to God. So it is what it is. Sometimes in this life, we have to make sacrifices for what we feel is right. And the decision that I made was to walk away.
Well, so press that into the corner. I mean, explain. So what is it about that oath and what is it about putting on that
thank you.
uniform? Connect those dots for us.
Okay. So in the military, your number one responsibility is, particularly as an officer, right? And where you will have subordinates under you. And I was a battalion commander. So in the Army, being a commander is a significant amount of responsibility. I mean, the military is run by commanders. Okay. When you're a commander, you're responsible for everything your unit does or fails to do. You're the commander in the good times. You're the commander in the bad times. You're the face of the unit when things go well. You're the face of the unit when things go poorly. And I took that responsibility very seriously. So for me, the oath that I took to the Constitution means that I believe in the principles upon which the Republic was founded. I also believe that first and foremost, the military exists to safeguard the liberties of the American people. And so once I felt like the military had departed from its, from its own charter, from the very reason for its existence, I decided that, I'm going to have to leave this organization. Again, not because I have problems with the organization itself, but because I feel like the military has almost become, a captured institution, if you will. So, the institution itself is made up of people, but the people running the institution right now are people that I do not feel comfortable, remaining under their command. So I decided I was going to have to leave. Now, of course, this happened in the wake of me losing my command. So I was relieved of command for refusing to go along with the COVID-19 vaccine mandate. And then a couple of months later, once I realized, the military was not going to come to its senses, that's when I resigned.
So what were those conversations like that you were having with I don't know, your upper command and with your troops? What was I guess kind of follow-up question there too. Why not fight through your 20-year retirement either? But let's start with the first part of that. Okay,
sure. So what kind of conversations did I have with my immediate superiors? So my immediate superior, I was a battalion commander. That means that my direct boss is the brigade commander. I was a lieutenant colonel. He was a full colonel. You got a couple of battalions that are in a brigade. And then my boss above him would have been the division commander. So I was a battalion commander in the 101st Airborne Division. So that means that my boss 2 levels up was the division commander. So the commander of the entire 101st Airborne Division. So, very historic unit with just, an incredible legacy. But when I would have conversations with these 2 immediate superiors, I mean, they were cordial conversations, but we found ourselves as, gentlemen, officers that were on opposite sides of an issue. To set the timeline, because this might make this might paint a clearer picture of exactly what happened. So I took command of my battalion in June of 2021. The COVID-19 vaccine mandate was implemented 2 months later in August of 2021. Yeah. And I was relieved in October of 2021. So I was only in command for about 4.5 months of what should have been a 2-year position. So, of course, I was very upfront with my superiors. I told them just before the vaccine mandate was implemented, I told them as soon as I took command, I know the writing is on the wall. I know this thing will become mandatory. I'm not going to go along with it because I personally am not going to take it. But I also don't want to be part of, commanding my subordinates, those who don't want to take it. I don't want to tell them to take it against their will. So it's kind of, both of those things there. Now, to answer the other part of your question, here's why I took the route to resign. Because another question kind of wrapped up in this is, did I submit a religious exemption request like a lot of people did? Now, they were almost all denied, but a lot of people went that route. I did not. And the reason I did not is not because I did not have religious objections to the mandate. I did and do. But for me, and this is just my own personal stance on this, I felt that by submitting for a religious exemption request, first of all, I would be requesting an exemption for myself, but by virtue of my position in command, even if my exemption requests were approved, I would still find myself having to order all my subordinates to take it potentially against their will. I didn't want to do that.
Right.
And that's assuming that mine would have even been approved, which it likely would not have. But the other reason is, in my mind, if I submit this religious exemption request, it's almost as if my religious objection is to, the production or the research or the development that went into the creation of the injections. A lot of people talk about the fetal cell lines. So I do have a problem with that. Don't get me wrong. But my problems don't begin and end there. I thought this whole thing was sinister from the beginning. I was not willing to concede these shots are necessary, that they're safe, that they're effective. So for me, it wasn't just a question about how they might have been produced. It was a question as to how we even got here for the creation of these shots in the first place and kind of the narrative that we had been sold from the beginning. So I wasn't going to concede any of those points. So I was a hard refusal. And then, it ends with me resigning. That's kind of how we got to that point.
What about Gabe's? I think one of the follow-up question was, why not try to fight through to your 20-year mark?
Retirement.
Yeah, I thought about it. And potentially I could have even stalled for a couple of months to be able to do that. The easiest way for me to have done that would have been to submit a religious exemption request, which I wasn't going to do. But still, I could have potentially stalled. But the Army, at least what they said was they had put out a hard line. So in January of 2022, there was a directive from the headquarters of the Army that came out and said, by July 1st, 2022, we will have a fully vaccinated Army, except for maybe a couple of exemptions that might be honored here or there. Very, very few, right? And so if you're not vaccinated by 1 July 2022, then you will be processed out of the Army. So I'd kind of been backed into the corner. And so when I made the decision to resign, one was because for everything I just explained, I thought it was the morally stronger position.
Right.
But the other thing was a more practical reason. So it wasn't entirely just moral. There was a practical reason too. If I got to July 1st, which would still leave me about 10 months from the 20-year mark, and they were to separate me, the word on the street was they were separating everyone with a general discharge as opposed to an honorable discharge. But if I were to resign, I would retain the honorable discharge. There's kind of two reasons. One, a practical reason, and one just the what I figured to be the morally stronger position. Because that's so just so you know, there are a lot of people who got kicked out over this,
right? And
they did leave with general discharges. So what that means is there can be later employment implications there, because if you go to a future employer and your employer asks you for your discharge paperwork from the military, and you produce discharge paperwork that mentions the characterization of your discharge as being general, and then mentions a word like misconduct, which was the word that they were using.
Wow.
Your employer has no idea what does misconduct mean?
Right.
Does misconduct mean that you got caught for drunk driving, that you had some sort of, improper relationship with a subordinate? I mean, that can mean anything. Yeah. Not a disagreement over a medical decision about what to do with your body. But so those, words have meanings. And when you use a word that has a lot of weight behind it, such as misconduct, and you put that on someone's discharge paperwork, that's going to come with future employment implications. And there are individuals right now that are in that situation because they were forced out by the military.
Brad, I can't help, but it seems to me that there had been things going on in the military before now for this to happen. In other words, where all of a sudden a little pressure from the higher ups, or a little pressure from COVID, or a little pressure from the politics of the situation cause men who are strong and fought for our country and trained and went through boot camp, something I'll never do, went through and were strong men, but all of a sudden kind of buckle under this
mandate
and kind of cultural political situation. What was going on in the military before now for this to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, if we rewind the clock 3.5 years, I mean, it's just incredible what has happened over the last couple of years, especially in the military. So 2 things I would say specifically, right? So number one, if the military has always been a highly respected institution with the American public, that has changed. Over the last couple of years, that has changed. But the military, above and beyond just the very specific duty to protect the republic, defend the republic, but also uphold the Constitution, the military has also been highly respected for safeguarding these virtues such as courage, integrity, honor. But when we talk specifically about courage, I think one of the things that we're seeing is physical courage and moral courage are not exactly the same. Now, they're certainly related. Yeah. And sometimes you can have both in the same individual. And sometimes you can have an individual that engages in an act that is both morally and physically courageous, but not always, right? And so I think what we've seen lately is, and this hits home because I have peers, I have very good friends who I consider to be very, very good people that with this issue, they're on the wrong side. And I'll tell you, me, 19 years, lieutenant colonel, battalion commander, I had a pretty good career, maybe even well above average, but I would never say that I was a perfect officer. I would never say I did everything correctly. But when I look at this issue, I tell you, maybe I lost my command and maybe I lost my retirement. Maybe even I lost whatever would have remained of my career had I continued to go on. Maybe I would have been promoted to colonel. I mean, who knows, right?
Right.
But at least I do not have to look myself in the mirror and feel uncomfortable with the person kind of staring back at me. And I do feel like right now there is a phenomenon across the military known as moral injury. So moral injury occurs, first of all, we've all felt moral injury with ourselves when we do something that is against our own moral code. I mean, we've all been there. We've done something we're not proud of. We feel guilt, we feel shame, etc. So now imagine just extrapolating that feeling that we all feel sometimes personally, extrapolating that across the force where people feel, I would say, uncomfortable with themselves, but they're also uncomfortable with their immediate superiors and they're uncomfortable with the senior Pentagon officials right now. And I will tell you that right there represents a strategic threat to the United States because we have an ineffective fighting force. We have an ineffective fighting force when we have soldiers who are uncomfortable at what because here's what I would say. You have individuals out there who are both victims of moral injury and they're perpetrators of moral injury at the same time. How does that happen? You have an individual who was uncomfortable with what they were forced to do, but then they also passed on those orders to individuals. And now we have individuals that are starting to come up with injuries. We have individuals who are disgusted with what they were a part of. They've seen injuries that have occurred with people that they ordered to take these injections. People are leaving the military in droves. The military service has often been generational. It's been like a family tradition.
Right.
You serve because your parents, your grandparents. Well, now veterans or retiring service members are telling their military age children, do not enlist, do not join, do not go to the service academies. They're no longer recommending service. And that represents a huge rift in what military service has meant to this nation for generations.
That's part of the question that I had lined up is, you have, I didn't even think about the moral side of this. I was just thinking about the physical side. So you got physical injury, right? Now you have moral injury, and now you have trust issues running all the way through because the guy that I'm looking at is supposed to protect me. I don't know if I can trust him anymore.
Right. And that affects your courage.
There's
affects your prowess. It affects your
your willingness to go risk your life.
I know you got an ad you want to read. I got a question I want to ask you, Brad, after Pastor Toby gets done reading this question.
Okay. Summer's been great here across Politic. We want you to join us.
Besides Vimeo kicking us off.
No, it's been great.
Hey, I was just going to get to that.
Okay. All right.
First, we're no longer calling it the Fight, Laugh, Feast Club. It's now called the Fight, Laugh, Feast Pub, or just the Pub. Second, we're launching a new line of content focused on family entertainment. We will have our new show, This America, and our exciting new Rowdy Christian guides, highlighting the practical guides to fun and godly life. Like we're doing like pipe smoking and smoking brisket.
Doing food, smoking,
a little bit of
all
everything.
kinds of stuff.
Okay. Additionally, we will have the live streaming of our conferences in the pub and all our past conference talks, all bundled within our new polished Fight, Laugh, Feast app, which is due to drop pretty much any day. I mean, as soon as the App Store gods.
The App Store gods, but now we have about 300 videos that have been deleted out of the app because of Vimeo. So we're having to do a bunch of...
We're uploading them, re-uploading them.
To our app. So that might flag a problem in the drop of the app.
Oh,
so we haven't heard back from iTunes or Google.
Pray against the Vimeo and App Store demons.
We're working on it.
And ask God to bless that. But anyways, sign up today if you're not already a member of the pub. Head over to fightlaughfeast.com, join the pub, that's fightlaughfeast.com, and join the fight for free speech and against censorship and for the truth.
So, Brad, is this a global issue with the military of every nation, or is it just America? Because it seems like everybody had to go through COVID. COVID wasn't just something that America went through. Everywhere shut down. Everybody's military was forcing vaccines. Everybody was going through this. So this is not just a America issue, right?
I agree with you. It is not. So here's what we're seeing, and this is kind of my view on where we're going. When we see what happened, so here's what I think. The number one lesson we have to take from the last couple of years, the last 3.5 years, is that the world may not quite work the way that we all have kind of been told for a long time. And I just think, I believe in God. I know you guys are very strong believers. Unfortunately, evil also exists. And there's some evil people who I think are trying to, for lack of a better term, propagate evil and enslave humanity. And unfortunately, I think that, So, what we see happening with the United States is, unfortunately, the United States is just not the republic that it once was. But when you want to look, so let's look, for example, at some of our closest allies. Look at what's going on in Canada. Look at what's going on in Australia, for example, or in the UK. I mean, their militaries are going through similar issues as ours, but also just with the lockdowns and with some of the draconian measures that were put into place during COVID over the last couple of years, New Zealand as well. I mean, they were just as bad, or in some cases worse, than the United States.
Right.
Now, if we look at other countries, some of the ones that we consider, our rivals or our strategic adversaries, like Russia and China. Well, I mean, we kind of saw their part in this whole COVID thing too. And now we see what's going on in Ukraine, and there's already talk about what's going on in Taiwan. And I just think that we got to be really careful, because I think we just have to be very careful about what we're told. We have to be very careful about what we accept from our government. We got to continue to pray for our leaders, even if they don't necessarily deserve it. And just at the same time, just keep ourselves, spiritually sharp, and also, mentally and physically sharp as well.
Brad, one of the kind of our themes has been about this whole COVID 2020 thing is that we don't want our people to forget what happened, because if you forget what happened, then you don't have a way history repeats itself.
You're not ready for the next round.
You're not ready for the next fight, the next battle, and so forth. It seems like people are starting to not care that much. I'm sure people in the military are starting to feel like, okay, the pressure's off. We're fine now. We can move forward. What's your thoughts on that, and how should we be thinking about what happened in 2020 and kind of the future fight for American freedoms?
Yeah, so I think one of the most dangerous traps that we can fall into, just as human beings, is apathy. And a lot of times, just the daily world, just the grind of daily life, sometimes it can be easy to forget some of these things that have happened. And I think we have to work hard against that. You're right. You're exactly right. We have to remind people exactly what happened, exactly how they stole our freedoms from us. And we got to make sure that we're prepared, and we got to do everything possible to try and ensure that this doesn't happen again. And I'll tell you, the mechanisms that were in place to allow something like COVID to happen, and then just the propagation of the narrative that went with it, those mechanisms were not put into place overnight. So it's almost like we have to peel back the onion and realize what happened over a period of years and or decades for us even to get to the point that a COVID was even possible. But you're right. Now we kind of look back, we do our forensic analysis of what has happened the last couple of years, and then we gotta realize, all right, but where do we go going forward? How do we ensure that this never happens again? How do we ensure collectively, like our communities, our nation, how do we ensure this never happens again? But then at a more personal level, with us as individuals or our families or our direct personal friends, how do we ensure that we protect ourselves, that we protect those around us?
Brad, do you think that one of the significant missteps, and you talk about peeling back the onion, I'm maybe there's things you'd point to even further back, but I'm thinking to myself, it seems like welcoming women into combat has been one of the most shameful things that we've done as a nation. Is that one of the key places where we were already set up for this?
So here's what I would say about that. So these things always happen in stages right now. So let's say, for example, somebody wants to quibble with you about that decision. But what I would tell you about that decision is that decision was never about women in combat. That decision was to get us to where we are now, with the full-blown acceptance of transitioning transgenders in the military, because you never could have gotten there without preparatory steps along the way. Right. So yes, I think you're 100% right. But right now, the military is talking about not just, receiving transgenders into the military, but of course, paying for their transitional surgeries. But then also, a lot of those individuals can never even deploy, so they can never even carry out the functions for which we have a military. Insane. Because they're on so much medications or the surgeries, et cetera, et cetera.
Insane. That's freaking insanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Brett,
but these things always happen incrementally. So you have to have these incremental decisions along the way to get to like something that just seems absolutely ludicrous where we are now.
Well, they're also talking about funding abortions for states where the military.
And I guess that's one of the reasons why I'm sort of pointing back there. I mean, I don't know if there's something else behind. Even I'm sure there was something before that, but it's at least in my mind one of the things where it's like a lot of conservatives. We're seeing this even in like the Republican Party, who it's whatever pseudo conservative, but like where they're like, well, we got to accept homosexuality now. We're just against grooming kids, or something like that, where we have this bad habit of wanting to just turn the clock back 15 minutes rather than recognizing exactly your point, which is that no, like you don't understand. Like we got on this slide a decade ago. We got on this slide 2 decades ago. You can't go back up a quarter of the slide and not expect to just slide back down again. Right. So, but I'm wondering if there's things, if that's, if it's women in combat, or if there was something before that even where we say
atheist chaplains.
Whatever.
What?
Muslim chaplains.
Atheistic chaplains.
Dry water? What is that?
So I think there's a term for this. I mean, this gradualism, is a technique of Fabian socialism where the people are never going to go from A to Z. So you slowly and very incrementally, you put in graduated steps for people to get to where you want them to go right now. And now we just live in this postmodern world where, we're almost, it's almost as if we're fighting against the very fabric of reality, not to mention the ordained and implemented order of God that now we find ourselves just almost trying to fight against.
That's right.
Nah, incrementalism doesn't work.
I know we're almost out of time, but
you're gonna take my last question. Go ahead.
Well, I actually have I got a couple more, 2 more questions. Okay. I know we're out of time. Brad, are you seeing any progress in this fight? Like I don't know how much you're still involved. I know we've talked to other folks in the military, outside of the military, along this vaccine mandate stuff. I know that, it seems like public sentiment has broadly kind of started shifting to like, you know, I mean, you know, the comedians at least are joking about, you know, how the jabs don't work anymore. And it is that the mandates, some of the mandates have been dropped. Most of the mandates have been dropped, I think. Are you seeing any progress in that fight? Where at least on the COVID insanity that's being reversed, or that any of the damage done is being put back? I know the physical damage is hard to put back in the box, but I'm wondering about people losing jobs like you and other people who were discharged for it.
So a couple of months ago with the the NDAA, Congress kind of put the screws to DOD and made them repeal the mandate.
Right.
That was a victory, but it was kind of a small victory. Here's what has not happened. They have not necessarily started to go back and invite those that they kicked out to come back in on any sort of a massive scale. What they did was those that were still in some sort of adjudication process to be separated, they stopped that. But those who had already been kicked out, I think some of them maybe have been invited back, but by no means, by no means all, and by no means even most. Then there are individuals like me who weren't kicked out but left technically of our own will and accord. They certainly have not invited us back. So I do think a lot of the damage has not been repaired. I don't even know necessarily how they will repair it. I do think people are waking up. There are plenty of reasons to be hopeful and optimistic. But I think when you're hopeful and optimistic, you are hopeful and optimistic while also acknowledging the full extent of what has been done. Otherwise, you're just naive. Yeah. So I think we have to be fully cognizant of exactly what has happened and then be hopeful and optimistic that we can move forward from here. And we're doing so, but very slowly. I do wish we'd kind of, kick it in and move faster.
Did you get them all out?
Well, I have another one, but I was going to let you have one if you want one.
Well, mine's more of a wrap up one. Okay. So yeah.
All right. Brad, what do you tell young men who come and say, I'm thinking about joining the military. I'm thinking about going into the Army or whatever. What would you tell someone who's thinking about going into one of the services?
Yeah, tough question. So we'd have to have a conversation. What I would ask them is, what is it about the military that makes you want to join? Because here's the thing. I mean, I joined the military, right? So of course I completely understand where a young man is coming from, because the military for so long was that almost like that masculine rite of passage. I mean, of course, serve your country, but there's also kind of this desire to want to test yourself. Yeah. Men, and especially young men, want that. And I would also say need that. So I would have a conversation with that individual, and maybe we talk about some other methods in which they might be able to still meet that goal. And maybe also talk about other ways in which you can actually serve your country to a greater degree, which doesn't involve enlisting in the military. And here's why joining the military might be, here's some things you might not have thought about, etc. However, if someone was dead set on joining the military, I would say, okay, go with my blessing. I understand what you're trying to do, but just, understand what that may mean and what you may not be thinking about. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but I would just want that person to make a fully informed decision, right, and really think it through before they decided to do that, I guess.
In the military, I mean, several other vocations are increasingly this way, but I mean, my general thing, I think a lot of my advice and counsel as a pastor to young men that come talk to me sometimes about this is, similar warnings, similar, cautions. And then if somebody is really set on it, I say something along the lines of, okay, go for it. But you need to be basically willing to lose your career at any moment. Like know where your line is. Like you need to know where your line is. And if somebody orders you to cross the line, be willing to lose your career over it.
That's perfect advice. Yeah, I concur with that wholeheartedly.
So Brad, you retired, you quit, right? So
Resigned.
I'm sorry.
Come on,
man.
Resigned.
Retired.
You decided not to be there anymore. Nobody threw you out. What are you doing now, though? Are you just going around talking about this, or do you have some sort of
strategy?
What is your goal at the end of the day?
Yeah. Okay. Great. So I do work in a lot of circles with other individuals who are doing a lot of this. So a lot of this is speaking out. I also write fairly extensively, and I've been doing that the last couple of months. So I have a Substack that I started a couple of months ago. It's under my name and then 10. So just Brad Miller 10.substack.com. I write quite a bit on that. And a lot of what I do is just try and get individuals to realize exactly what has happened and where we're going from here and why this is so dangerous and what we need to do moving forward. I've also started to do some work with a science research organization that has as a part of it an online learning community called IPAC EDU. So IPAC stands for the Institute of Pure and Applied Knowledge, and then just EDU for education. So IPAC-edu.org. And there are all types of courses on there. And I myself am getting ready to teach a course on there in which we go through and we read dystopian texts such as 1984, Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451, et cetera.
Yeah.
And we use them as an interpretive lens to try and comprehend our world. So that's I'm very much still engaged in the fight right now. So I will tell you, here's kind of how I would wrap up the answer to your question very succinctly. Another reason why I stepped out of uniform is because I think I can do more in the fight for freedom out of uniform than I could in uniform. And I'm still very much dedicated to doing that.
Mm-hmm. I surely hope so. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you. Thank you for coming on Cross Politic.
Hey, thank you. Hey, this was great. I really appreciate it.
All right. If you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Until next time, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politic.
My name is Jamie Piles. I joined Samaritan in December of 1996. We were homeschooling our kids, and we were already thinking outside the world's box, if you will. And I saw a little tiny classified ad about this new kind of idea I'd never heard of before. My first reaction was, that's the kind of thing that we would do, isn't it? And so I finally called the number, talked to them, and the more I asked them questions, the more I liked their answers.